Something strange happened on the show today, and for a moment, nobody in the studio quite knew what to do about it. Robert Downey Jr. was smiling, but the room definitely wasn't. Quick heads up, subscribe to Backstory Uncovered, because what starts as a normal conversation here is about to take a turn no one expected. The audience had been clapping as Robert Downey Jr. walked out onto the stage, relaxed and charismatic as always. He waved casually, shook Whoopi Goldberg's hand, and sat down across from her at the table. Whoopi smiled politely. Robert Downey Jr., everybody. More applause. Good to be here, Robert said, leaning back slightly in his chair. The conversation started normally enough, talking about his latest project, the years he spent in Hollywood, and how his career has evolved. Whoopi nodded along, listening carefully. So, Robert, she said after a moment, tilting her head slightly, you've had one of the most interesting career journeys in Hollywood. A lot of highs. Some very public lows. The audience murmured softly. Robert kept smiling, but his eyes sharpened just a little. Whoopi continued, and I think people sometimes wonder why Hollywood keeps giving second chances to certain people. Do you ever feel like you've been given opportunities others wouldn't get? There was a small pause. Robert leaned forward slightly. That's an interesting way to phrase it. Whoopi shrugged lightly. I'm just asking the question people ask. A few audience members shifted in their seats. Robert let out a quiet chuckle. You mean the question people assume? Whoopi raised an eyebrow. No, I mean the question people talk about. Robert nodded slowly. Right. Another pause. Then he said calmly, You know what I find interesting, though? Whoopi folded her hands. What's that? Robert glanced briefly at the audience before looking back at her. Whenever someone turns their life around, people say they were given a second chance. The room grew quieter. But nobody talks about the years of work it takes to actually earn it. A few audience members clapped softly. Whoopi gave a thin smile. Sure. But accountability matters too. Robert nodded immediately. Absolutely. Then he added, still calm but noticeably firmer. But accountability usually happens in private. A ripple moved through the audience. Whoopi leaned slightly forward. Are you saying we shouldn't talk about it publicly? Robert shook his head. No, he said. I'm saying when someone brings it up like that on television, it stops being about accountability. Another pause. It starts being about spectacle. The audience reacted with a louder murmur. Whoopi looked surprised for a moment. Spectacle, she repeated. Robert didn't break eye contact. Yeah, he said quietly. And I've spent enough years of my life being one. The room went completely still. For a moment, the studio was completely silent. Whoopi Goldberg sat back slightly in her chair, clearly caught off guard by the shift in tone. Robert Downey Jr. hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't lost his smile. But the calm way he said it made the tension in the room impossible to ignore. Whoopi cleared her throat. Well, she said, adjusting slightly in her seat, this show talks about real things. We don't avoid uncomfortable conversations. Robert nodded immediately. And I respect that. But then he leaned forward just a little. What I don't always understand, he continued, is why those conversations sometimes sound less like curiosity and more like judgment. A low "oh" rippled through the audience. Whoopi's expression tightened slightly. I'm not judging you, she replied. I'm asking a fair question about public accountability. Robert tilted his head. But notice something, he said calmly. We started this segment talking about my work, and somehow we ended up talking about mistakes I made 20 years ago. The audience clapped lightly. Whoopi raised a hand. Those mistakes were very public. Exactly, Robert replied instantly. And I spent years taking responsibility for them. He paused. Privately, publicly, legally, personally. Another murmur from the crowd. Then he added, a little more directly now. But when someone keeps bringing them back like it's breaking news, it stops being accountability. Whoopi folded her arms slightly. So what would you prefer? That people pretend none of it happened? Robert shook his head immediately. No, he said. I'd prefer people notice the part of the story that came after." That line landed hard. The audience broke into louder applause. Robert gestured lightly with his hands. Recovery. Growth. Showing up for work. Building relationships. Trying to be a better human being than you were before. He shrugged. That part usually gets about 10 seconds of airtime. The crowd clapped again, louder this time. Whoopi tried to respond, but the reaction from the audience kept building. Robert wasn't smiling quite as much now. "But the past," he continued, glancing around the studio. "That gets a full segment." A few people in the audience even laughed nervously. Whoopi leaned forward again, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. "Well, Robert," she said, "people are interested in the full story." Robert nodded slowly. "Then let's tell the full story." Another quiet pause filled the room. "Because the full story," he said calmly, "isn't that I messed up." He looked straight at her. "It's that I didn't stay there." The audience erupted into applause. Some people even stood up. Whoopi blinked, clearly surprised by how strongly the crowd reacted. Robert sat back in his chair again, the tension finally easing from his posture. After a moment, he smiled slightly and said, "Anyway, I thought we were here to talk about a movie." The crowd laughed. Even Whoopi let out a short breath and nodded. "Well," she admitted, "you definitely gave us something to talk about." The applause continued as the moment settled. And honestly, that exchange left the entire studio divided. "So now we want to hear from you. Do you think Robert Downey Jr. was right to push back like that? Or did Whoopi Goldberg ask a fair question? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Backstory Uncovered for more moments that leave the whole studio speechless.